Welcome to today's webinar, CS in Science webinar. The CS in Science facilitators are Kerrie Rovito from Hamilton Elementary and Rodney Weems from Ariel Academy Elementary School. Welcome. The agenda today for the CS in Science, which is called Project Guts, is effectively implementing CS in Science in your classrooms. So it's reinforcing the concepts and practices through videos, registering students, using instructional materials, and then practical instructional strategies for teachers in classrooms who are actually implementing this currently. And then improving students' critical thinking skills, strategies for that as well.
The CS Science Project winners do not take the place of CS for All 9 summer or semester CS and Science training for teachers in cohorts 1, 2, or 3.
Right. So this does not take the place of the CS for All required summer or semester training for Project Guts for cohorts 1, 2, and 3. It's intended to provide information, an overview of the curriculum, and not training for ongoing CS and Science Project Guts integration into the classroom or curriculum planning instruction. Again, this does not take the place of any phased the online training, the summer training, or the semester training throughout the school year. So now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitators, which is Kerrie Rovito and Rodney Weems. You can take it away.
Hey everyone. So I first want to start off by saying why you should do computer science in your science classes. First off, there is an importance of computer modeling in all science fields. It is another way of conducting experiments and collecting data. It aligns to the next generation science standards and frameworks, especially when you're looking at the modeling standards. You are able to go through and actually replicate a lot of different scientific practices within your classroom. It emphasizes computational thinking and problem solving. It builds on skills that they might be exposed to during the hour of code and any prior computer science exposure they have from previous classes. And part of the computer science continuum that CPS has is pioneering and will help prepare kids for their high school computer science classes. So the 2 pages that you are going to need to know as you go through and access Project Guts is you can go through and look at the projectguts.org/resources page and the slnova.org page. So I'm actually going to take you through right now and show you what those 2 pages look like. So for the first one, you are going to need the Project Guts resource or their actual slnova page, and that's just slnova.org. You would go ahead and log into your profile, and once you're here, you would go through, and this is where you can actually see the galleries. And so these are all the private ones I have. I also have public ones. Something I want you to be aware of that I want to show you once we're in here is how to make something go from your private gallery to your public gallery. This is going to be especially important if you have students who are making presentations where you will be able to see them. They will have to do this. So what I'm going to go through and show you is one that is from a starter base model that I used earlier on. So it's going through and loading up right now. Sorry, it's taking so long. So what they are going to need to do in order for you to be able to see theirs is they are going to click on Add this project to my gallery. Once they add the project to their gallery, they will need to make sure that they click on Add to Public Gallery and click Submit. And now it is something that they will be able to share with you. So like I said, if they do not do this step, they will not be able to share their projects with you. It will only be private to them. Then if they want to go through, you can click on the link right up here, and they just need to copy and paste it wherever you have them turning it in. I'm letting you know right now that I do not have all their students go through and just add me as a collaborator to this project. What ends up happening if you do that, if you click on my profile and go back to this, it will show up as a huge long line of all of your students' projects, and it'll make it extremely hard for you to go back and find what you need. So what I have my students do is I use Classroom But if you want to use another online tool, such as Schoology, to go through and post an assignment, you can just have your students share your links, and then you can go through and grade them from there. So I can create an assignment, and then students, in order to turn them in, can just turn in a link, and then I can very easily go through and see where all their links are without adding them to my projects. So just a little bit of a housekeeping on how I actually use it in my class, the SL Nova page. The next page I want to show you is the projectguts.org/resources page. So it's projectguts.org/resources. And this will be one of the most useful sites that you can possibly use. So as you can see right here, I have an introduction to computer modeling. I have my water as a shared resource. I have my ecosystems and chemical reactions. So everything that you are going to need for module 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be located on this page. This includes the curriculum. It includes all PowerPoint presentations. It includes videos. It includes different tools that you might need to teach the lessons. Module 1 also includes a pretest. If you click on the pretest right here, this is extremely useful to use in your classroom if you have students with varying abilities to go through and see what they actually know. You will need to, if you give this to your students, you will actually need to request access. When you are granted access, you will be able to copy and paste, or you will be able to make a copy of this Google Doc, and you will be able to share it with your students. And so you will not be able to see any answers if they just go through and edit this pretest right now. It will only show up on the head administrator's answer key. You will need to request access if you are giving this pretest to your students. But like I said, this is an excellent way for you to see what your students actually know, especially if they are coming in with varying different backgrounds in computer science. I'm going to go back to the resources page. As you go through all the different modules, you can also get a Dropbox link, as that's more convenient for you if you'd like to tie those in to all the different module files. You can go through and you can look at the different videos, which we will be coming back to in a little bit, but this includes videos on Star Logo Nova Basics, where you can see how to actually set everything up. So Rodney will be talking about those in a little bit. If you go down to the Star Logo Nova resources, I'm going to show you 2 of the most important resources that you can possibly use in your classroom from this page. The first one is All Blocks and Drawers. When you click on All Blocks and Drawers, this will bring you to the page that shows you what blocks are located in which drawers. I would recommend that you have at least one of these printed out in color for all of the students or all the tables that you have where students are working, so that they can very easily access this. A lot of times students get very frustrated because they don't know where blocks are, and it wastes a lot of time for them going through and searching through all the drawers. This is an extremely easy way for them to be able to not only know where the different blocks are, but for them to determine what blocks they may need in the future. So for example, if they know that they need to spread everything out that's on the screen, they may not know what the block is called, but if you pull up this sheet, you can have them look and say which one of these blocks may make everything else on the screen stand away from each other. So they can look over here and see, oh yes, scatter might be able to do that. So this is definitely an excellent tool if you have students who are going through and starting and using the blocks. They do get faster over time, but this will be one of their biggest helpful things while they are actually going through and starting to code that you can give them. There's another thing on here where I have debugging tips for Star Logo Nova. You can go through and show this to your students if you would like them to see how they can go through projects if they get stuck. This one might take a second to load, so I'm going to come on to the next one. And then I also have the Star Logo Nova cookbook. So when I have the Star Logo Nova cookbook, this is where you can show students, and you can again have this printed out one per table, or this can be something that you pull up as your own tool to where you can have students see how to do the codes from before. So for example, if you are trying to make a data table, but you don't know how to go through and do that, you can look on the cookbook and you can see data boxes. And then if you scroll down, you can go to page 18 and it will show you exactly how you can go through and make your data boxes. So those would be right here. Then you can go through, and if there's something else where you don't know how to do it, if you are missing one of your blocks, you can have students go through and look on here to see maybe one of the blocks that they're missing. Or maybe they can show where they didn't even know that they were able to create that. So for example, if they didn't know they could chase another braid, maybe you could include that in their assignment where you can say, well, you're already doing one thing, I want you to go through and chase it. And instead of you having to go through and sit with them and show them exactly step by step how to do that, then they can just look in the cookbook and they can see how they would go through and chase another braid.
Kerrie, you might need to go back. This is Charnel. You might need to go back to the PowerPoint. It's not showing on the screen what you're doing right now.
Oh, okay. Are the web pages showing up that I'm showing?
It's on the pre-test for Project Guts page.
Okay, let me go through.
Just go back to the PowerPoint.
Okay. Oops, shoot. All right. Are you able to see this now?
No. Mm-mm. It's still showing the pre-test page for Project Guts.
Okay, I'm trying to close that out. I'm sorry about this. Everything else was loaded up. I'm not seeing it. I closed out of that page. I'm not quite sure how to, everything else is closed up. I haven't pulled up. Rodney, while I go through and do that, can you go through and say some tips also for what other things may be useful on this Project Guts resource page?
Okay. I think what's happening too is that there's a delay because I can see the screens moving as you're closing.
Oh, you're seeing it move?
I am. The other participants on the call, are you able to see the screens moving as Kerrie changes them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So I don't know, Charnel.
You guys
it may be
can see the movement occur?
for you.
Yeah, Charnel, it might be yours. I know there was a lag before.
Okay. All right, then keep going. Don't mind me then. If everybody else can see it, we're good to go.
All right, perfect. So let me also show you these Star Logo Nova debugging tips. This was the Word document that I had pulled up earlier. So we try to recommend these to students without if they are running into any problems. These are probably the most often things that are happening wrong within Star Logo Nova. So for example, if their widgets disappeared, which means that when they are in Star Logo Nova and they're actually in their page that looks like this, if their widgets over off to the left-hand side are not showing up, a lot of times it's just because they need to resize their page. And so I know they freak out and think that everything was deleted. So if these widgets over where it says set up and forever have disappeared, just have them resize their page. If it says you have an empty socket, I want you to make sure that they are going through and hitting save and making sure that you do not have words typed into any of the blocks. It must be numbers only that are typed in. If it's a color, for example, they actually have to go through and they have to find the color block. If they hit setup and forever and nothing's happening, you can make sure that they are hitting save and then refreshing the page. And if the slider values aren't changing correctly, they need to make sure that they are hitting enter at the end of putting in their numbers into the slider value. Then they also have that the graph is going slow or being updated. There's always problems with graphs. I know there's a lot of glitches with Star Logo Nova. Graphs seem to be the #1 area where there are glitches. So if for some reason your graph is not updating, I want to make sure that they are saved and then refresh the page and it should start working. So those are some major troubleshooting tips that are all located on the Star Logo Nova resource page. As we scroll down, I want to show you just a couple more. You have the coding challenges. These are really great for students who are working ahead of the rest of their class if you would like them to continue working ahead of the rest of their class, you can have them go through and they can do different challenges that get progressively harder as they go through the different levels. So for example, if they start on step one, that's going to be the easiest, and then they go up to step 7, which is going to be the hardest of these. And so you can either have these students who are working ahead be geniuses, so work at a genius bar where they're going around and helping other students, or you can have them go through and do these math challenges. So all of these are located on the Project Guts resource page for you to use whenever you need. The last one that I'm going to show you is the link to the online course, which would be the MOOC. The MOOC is actually, so here's our Project Guts online course. It will pull you up to this page. You will have to go through and log in to access all the information, but if you request access, you should be granted it. When you go through and click on the course will go through and show you exactly what we went through for modules 1, 2, 3, and 4 at all of the different trainings that we had. So we had the summer training, which was 3 days, where you learned module 1 and you learned one other module. Then in the fall when you came, you started learning the second module. And then in the winter when you came, you should have learned a third module. You also learned some debugging coding tricks there. So all of those courses will be listed here. You can go back and reference those if you missed any of them. You can also have a forum. If you click on the forum, it will have different topic boards where you can have discussions with people if you are having trouble with one of the different modules. Our two head people who are in charge of Project Guts regularly monitor these, and if anyone's having trouble, they will help you out and assist you, and we can give you their contact information a little bit later. People also post things like their rubrics on these pages, or different ideas they have for implementing Star Logo Nova within their classroom. So this is a great site if you are using Star Logo Nova in your class, and so that you can always ask questions and see who out there is also using Star Logo Nova and get ideas of how to best implement it within your classroom. As I go back to the PowerPoint, I'm going to have Rodney tell you how you can actually get started with accessing the Star Logo Nova resources.
Okay, so the big question is, how do I get started? What Project Guts has, it put on several videos through YouTube that you can access. We're going to look at the first couple of videos, but they're how you get started with Star Logo Nova, introduction to Star Logo Nova, registering in galleries, and introduction to Star Logo Nova, Spaceland, and the drawers. So it gives you a description of everything that's around. It would be a good idea to let your students see the video, and as you kind of have a discussion with them as they go through, my pause and play. So I think, Kerrie, we're going to queue up the first minute or so of the first two videos.
Yes.
Of the Nova website, how to get registered, and a little bit about what's in the galleries. So to start with, we're going to register. So we're at slnova.org, and you can see that there's some information here about Star Logo and such. And we're going to register. For this, you're going to need a new username and a password. And for this, the email is optional, but it is recommended in case you forget your login and you wanted to get your projects back. So then you hit submit, and now we're in, and you'll see that a couple things have changed. First of all, it used to be just slnova.org, but now that we're logged in, it also adds this extra information here, Guts Student, which was my login, and so it adds that to the web address. And then also it can show that same information is here that I'm logged in. You can see my profile and then some information about the username.
All right, so I'll go ahead and pause there. And just as a tidbit of what I do for my classroom, Rodney and I are both Chicago public school teachers. And for my students to register, I just had them use their same login that they used for their email and the same password. So it made it very easy for them to be able to remember it, and it made them very easy, or very very quickly able to remember this login when they have the same one for all things that they're logging into. So I'm going to go ahead and show you Spaceland and Drawers.
In Project Guts, we're going to be looking at some basics of the project area, and we're going to start on a very basic project, getting a turtle moving around. So we're logged in here, and we can tell that we're logged in because it has the information here next to the word My Profile. And we have My First Project, and we have put it in our private and our public gallery. This area up here, this white area here, is the information area that has some general information about the project. And this is the area here that's black background with the green. This green area here is Spaceland. It's where the action occurs. And you can move Spaceland if you grab it with your mouse, and then you can also zoom in and make it bigger or zoom out. And if you zoom out too much or zoom in too much, you can always reset the camera and it'll put it back in that center area. All new projects will start with a setup and a forever button, as well as a score box. But even if we click the setup, nothing happens. Even if we click the forever, because there's no coding there, so we haven't put any code to make anything happen behind those. You'll also see that there are some buttons here, edit widgets, and when you click on that, it grays out the area, and you also get this new red thing, new red button. We'll talk about that in the future. And to click out, you just click on edit widgets again. Same thing with edit breeds. You can click on that. You can see that there are breeds there. All new projects come within everyone of the world and the turtle, and you can add breeds here.
All right, so that's where we're going to pause.
So the videos are pretty straightforward. They're done by the group at Project Guts, and they're made to be able to provide you a refresher or a jumping off point for your students and for yourselves. Like if some things that you're not sure about or you don't remember, you want to prep your lesson before you give it. You're able to go through these videos, and like Kerrie said before, you can sign up for some of the online trainings, the MOOCs. There are also videos on the resource page that give you insight into each one of the different lessons, the modules themselves. So a good place to start would be looking at the videos on YouTube you can access through the resources page to start with your students.
And it's designed to introduce students to coding so that they complete the content area models or the modules. Without going through module 1, your students are most likely going to be lost as they go through Star Logo Nova, even if they have some prior experience using programs like Code.org's Hour of Code or Scratch. A lot of Star Logo Nova's drawers and blocks are very specific to how Star Logo Nova runs, and so they will need to go through and do module 1. The activities include plugged and unplugged lessons, which means that some of these we're going to be going through and they'll either be on paper or lessons that students go through and physically act out, and some will be on the computers, and the computer will go through and simulate exactly what the students did in the unplugged lessons. This is a link that shows you what you need to do as you progress through Module 1. Again, this is on the resource page under Module 1 if you want to use it while you are teaching it. But it gives the optional pretest. It gives you all of the videos that you will need to do the turn and talk, the teacher video where it goes through and actually teaches you how to do that lesson. It shows you what students will need for complex systems. You can see exactly where it takes you to the basics of when students start to actually code. It takes you to the starter modules. So all of this is already pre-made for you. This is a great way to go through when you are planning your lessons to be able to break up exactly what is happening in each day. I'm letting you know right now, just because they have one lesson, it probably will not take you just one class period. So Trailblazers will probably take you one class period. Bumper Turtles might take you 1 to 2 class periods. And so just because we have a lesson here, it doesn't mean it's a day. So it will totally depend on how quickly your students are working and how fast they are able to get through these activities, but do not try to plan all of these lessons in one day. It will not work. So all of those are included on our resource page. When I come back up, I'm just going to go through a quick overview of the Module 1 lessons. We have an optional pretest, which I showed you before. You will have to request access to that so that you are able to see the answers. Next, you have Lesson 1, which is an introduction to complex adaptive systems and computer modeling and simulation. And this is a great way for students to see that science is random. When you go through and you do code.org programs, or if you're doing Hour of Code, you have a very specific task that you are completing, and there's one thing that's going to happen at the end. So for example, if you have Elsa that's skating to make a snowflake, you know what's happening when she makes her snowflake. Or if you have a zombie that's going through a maze to eat a flower, students are going through and they are having the zombie follow a task to build a flower. Well, with Star Logo Nova, we are very much trying to introduce a complex adaptive system which models what would happen in the real world. And so this could be where one person's getting sick and it leads to an epidemic, or it could be birds flying and how they fly in different patterns, how fish swim. It is much more real world because the real world is random. It's not always going to follow one specific task. So going through that Lesson 1 is going to teach students what actually a complex adaptive system is and how that's different from computer programs they've seen in the past. Lesson 2 is going to be an introduction to Star Logo Nova and building flower turtles. So you will have different flowers that students will be designing. They will be making circle petals and square petals. This is very much just to get the basics of how Star Logo Nova works and what the different blocks do that they will be using for a majority of the time. For Lesson 3, we have conditionals with trailblazers and bumper turtles. So trailblazers would be an example of one of the unplugged activities. Students get to make a graph with different color blocks in it. It's red and black blocks. And then they will have to try and create a maze with the blocks that follow different patterns. So for example, if you hit a red block, you're going to have to turn left. If you hit a black block, they're going to have to turn right. So they will create mazes with these blocks. Then they will go through and use that knowledge of what they did in Trailblazers to have the bumper turtles do the exact same thing. So if they have their agent, the turtle, hitting a black block, they're going to have it turn right. Or if they have their agent hitting a red block, it's going to turn left. And so we take exactly what students just did on paper, and they will go through and code for that exact same scenario. Next, we have Lesson 4, which is probability with dice and data, which is an unplugged activity that leads into colliding turtles, a plugged activity. This shows students how randomness works. And so when we use dice and data, they are able to see on a scale of 1 to 10 how often things happen. This is really great, especially when you lead into epidemic models, because just because somebody is exposed to a virus, they might not get sick 100% of the time. Say they've had an immunity or they've had a vaccination. You want to be able to adjust for that. And so students are able to create slider bars where they determine the probability of somebody getting sick or of the probability of somebody getting healthy with colliding turtles. For Model 5, you are going to be modeling the spread of disease. So this is going to be where you have one agent that is sick and he will be making the rest of the population sick. Then once you get to Lesson 6, it will be adding instrumentation to your model and running experiments, which basically shows that you can add other variables to the situation. For example, what if you have a hospital where people can go to get better? Or what if you have an ambulance that drives around and cures people? So I'm going to show you just real quick what these look like. If you go into any of these starter projects, you can go to slnova.org. And back here, I'm not going to be using my username. If I go to slnova.org/guts, then it will take me to all the starter models. So you can see right here for Module 1, I have all of those starter models that I just told you about. So like colliding turtles, bumper turtles. And if I click on that, this will take me to the baseline of what I will need to do for that activity. So this would be the code that you share with your students. They would have to pull this up. But before they're able to go through and actually edit the code, you can see right here that they are not able to go through and edit the code right now. They will actually have to remix this. So they would click remix, and it's kind of like clicking save as. Now they would be able to go through and they would be able to edit Spaceland. And just remember that they need to add this project to their public galleries in order for you to see that. So that would be how they go through, and I can show you right now if I go through and click the paint landmarks. So I have the red and black blocks that I was telling you about earlier. I can click setup, and I can have my turtles do exactly what I was doing in my previous screen. So that is how you would go through for module 1, and start with your students. Next, Rodney is going to tell you a little bit about module 2 and what you will be covering in the Earth Science module.
Thank you, Kerrie. So, module 2, you and your students are looking at Earth Science in the classroom. The focus is on the water cycle, water being a shared resource, and what happens when it's overused. So you and your students will make water pumps, watch how groundwater can be overused, and how pumping this water from the ground relates to the water cycle. All of the things that Kerrie just spoke of in Module 1 is what prepares you and your students to be able to, what prepares you and your students to be able to do the programming inside the other modules, modules 2, 3, and 4. So the lessons inside module 2
are,
I can't, Kerrie, can you advance the slide?
yes. Oops, I'm sorry. Are you able to see that, Rodney?
Yes, now, okay, sorry. So lesson 1 introduces introduction to water as a shared resource. And lesson 2, math basics for modeling and water pumping base models. So this is where you'll use most of the blocks inside your math drawers. You know, you're getting into some better programming with your students. Lesson 3, adding more water pumps and running experiments. Lesson 4, customizing your water pumping model, so you're able to add 2 pumps. I think that's really in lessons 3 and some in 4. You're customizing it. You can use, evaporation, different things, extensions that come with it. And lesson 5, you're experimenting with your new water pumping model. So maybe some of the students that are moving a little bit faster or more advanced, you will give them different extensions. They can make whatever changes or tweaks that they come up with in the programming to show many different things. And as Kerrie is pulling up now, she's going to some of the modules inside Star Logo Nova to let you see an example of what the programming looks like.
So you can see right here, like Rodney was telling you, if you click setup, it completely changes the background color of Spaceland. So this will be the sky, and this will be the water molecules in the ground. And then you can see it's precipitating. You have the groundwater that's going through towards the bottom of the ground. This is actually a pump right here. So what the pump is doing is that the pump is soaking up all the groundwater, and then it is then releasing it back into the atmosphere. So something I've had my students do with this is they've gone through and they've seen how acid rain can be formed in the ground. And so if you have pollution, the acid rain can go into the ground and then come back down as pollution. So that'd be a great way to go through and show your students how modeling works. Throughout this program, you can add other pumps. You can see the different levels of what happens when you pump at different levels. One other thing that I want to show you about this module is when I go back, I had to scroll down to get to module 2, water resources. And the reason for that is when you go to the projectguts.org or the Star Logo Nova page, the first module 2 says greenhouse gases. And that was because when Rodney and I first went through this class, they actually had a module with greenhouse gases where you were able to take a factory to change the level of carbon dioxide within an ecosystem and then add trees to be able to counterbalance that. To make this more widely available in more states, since a lot of states have not adopted the next generation science standards because of their standards based on global warming, they have made the new water pump module. But if this is something that you would like to use in your class instead, if you think that greenhouse gases would be more applicable, if you go back to that Dropbox file that I showed you on the resource page, all the lessons are in there, and you have all of the starter modules right here. So you have two options of what you can do for module 2. So going back, I'll be telling you a little bit about module 3. Module 3 is a life science module, and this was designed to be used in your life science classroom. So if you are an earth science teacher, you do not need to teach this module. It focuses on food webs in the ecosystems, and students will measure the amount of energy being used by rabbits as they eat grass and how changing one variable in an ecosystem can affect all of the others. So in this module, lesson 1, we have ecosystems being a complex adaptive system. So like we learned in module 1, nature is random. It's not always going to work the exact same way at the exact same time. So you'll be able to change different variables, and it's not going to look the same as, or every time that you run it, even if you have the same things happening. For lesson 2, we have making a rabbits and grass model. So you will be determining the amount of rabbits, the amount of grass in an ecosystem, and seeing how that predator and producer relationship really depend on each other. For lesson 3, we have adding a predator to the rabbits and grass model. So now you have something that's going through and eating the rabbits. And so you can see what happens when you change one aspect of the food web. So for example, if you have the predator that's eating rabbits very quickly, you can see what happens to the grass then in that ecosystem. Or you can see where if the rabbits are overpopulating, what that does to the predator population. So it's a really neat way for your students to see how all parts of an ecosystem work in correlation with each other. For lesson 4, we have creating your own ecosystem model, which includes things like invasive species, local ecosystems, adding more producers and consumers, etc. So I have my students go through and actually model what happens with Asian carp or with zebra mussels in the Chicago River in Lake Michigan. So they are able to see how an invasive species really messes up a food web. For lesson 5, students go through and they actually design and run their own experiment using their own data or other animals that they would like to see how they interact within an ecosystem. And like I said before, each one of these lessons is not one day long. They may take you 2, 3, 4 days, depending on how quickly your students are able to code or what background knowledge they have. But these work really, really well they work really well after you have already done module 1, so that students know very quickly how to go through and already set up an inquiry model. I'm going to show you really quick just what the starter module looks like for module lesson 3. So if I scroll down to here, I have the ecosystem starter base model right here. And I know that it showed you on the page adding a lion to it, but my kids always really like adding different predators, like they add whales to eat things, or they add like penguins that are fighting off squids. So you can add a lot of different animals to this. Something I wanted to show you about this is that when you first start, there's a population chart right here that sits over Spaceland. To move that so your students can see, you just go to Edit Widgets, and you can move it over, and then click Edit Widgets again. So I don't know why it always starts right there, but you have to move it over when you first start. So again, if your students were editing this, they would remix it, put it in their own public gallery, and then once they click Setup, we have our rabbits, we have our grass. They're going through and eating it. We can zoom in and see what's happening. We can also go over here and we can see our rabbit and grass population over time. So that is what you will be covering in module 3. I'm going to have Rodney go through then and explain what's happening, and I'll click forever, oops, sorry. What's happening in our physical science unit, module 4.
Okay, thank you, Kerrie. I just wanted to recap a little bit of what Kerrie said about Module 1, more than just the introduction, it prepares you for all of the modules that follow, the programming that comes in the modules that follow. So in Module 4, this module is designed to be used in physical science classroom, and not every teacher will get to that. I think there are different grades, but it focuses on the chemical reactions on the microscopic level. Students will combine copper with silver nitrate and watch the breakdown as if it were under a microscope. And one of the things that I found most useful, there are videos that work with this, YouTube videos as well. And there's one that has a copper pipe that I think is the better one to show to your students, because you can see more of the chemical reactions that are taking place, the precipitate that falls, and the coloring of the water at the top of the beaker as the chemical reaction is happening. That's in Lesson 1. Lesson 2, modeling chemical reactions. Lesson 3, products of chemical reactions. And Lesson 4, complex ions and solutions. So I think that's where it really gets into with your students with the science, the physical science, and breaking down formulas, balancing equations. And Lesson 5, factors that impact the rate of chemical reaction. So you're able to put in sliders or things inside the programming to either add more of the silver nitrate, or you can take out, make the copper smaller. There are different things you can do, extensions that you can put in or have students work on that are maybe more advanced, that can show many different things with this. It's probably maybe one of the more interactive ones, because you can make the chemical changes show the coloring of the water inside your programming in Star Logo Nova. And I think, Kerrie, you're going to run the starter on this one as well.
So here's the starter. When I go through and click setup, what you actually have right here, those are little water molecules that are going around. So I can go through, I can add a copper strip to that. You can see right here I have 150 copper ions. I'm able to determine, based with my slider, how much silver nitrate I want to start. So I'm going to go through and add some silver nitrate to this as well. And then I can go through and shake up my water, and it actually shows you the chemical breakdown of the copper pipe over time. So that would be how you see for that one. If this is a little bit advanced for your class, I know that for my class I do show them how chemical breakdown occurs, but something that works better for my class is they also have the chemistry alternatives. So I prefer to use the sodium chloride dissolving in water. This works really great once you have concentration of solutions. Students can see what happens when you add sodium chloride to things. These models go along very, very well with the other lessons, and so you don't have to reteach anything or find any other curriculum. You can just go through and you can have your students edit these instead of the copper and the silver nitrate. So you can see right here I can add some sodium chloride down at the bottom. So I just added my salt. Then I add my water. So I just added my water molecules in. I give it a little shake, and then it starts to break those water molecules or the salt molecules up. So this seems to work better for my classroom, but depending on what you teach in yours, you may want to go through and use the copper chloride or the copper and the silver nitrate solution. But both of those are the same lessons that are in Module 4. So,
Kerrie,
do we have
which
to do all
for
this?
you was better for the physical science and balancing equations and things of that nature? Because I actually use this with my diverse learners, and just showing the chemical breakdown was a big piece of it, and doing the coding for it. But I know that certain grades don't really get to all of this, so maybe the teachers would benefit from using the one you just suggested more than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, just depending on what you use most in your class, either one of those show the same kind of reactions with chemical breakdowns. And so whichever you prefer, whichever makes the most sense in your classroom is the one that you should use. All right.
So Next, we have, well, do I have to do all of these modules? And, it's answered on the screen. No, you only should introduce your students to coding with module one. Again, that's the beginning, that's the introduction, and that's what prepares your students for all the other modules to follow. Then, you'll teach the module that corresponds with the branch of science that they are learning. And throughout the year, you'll get to whichever parts or whichever module it's time for your in your curriculum to teach. So you don't have to do every one of these, or there's not a set schedule for them. Computer science best teaching practices. So what we found is pair programming, two heads are better than one, reduces the number of projects to oversee. So Kerrie in the beginning spoke about how students would upload or send you the work that they've done. And it also helps with limited resources. You'll have a driver and a navigator. And there are actually some videos in code.org that talk about driver and navigator or pair programming. The guru or the genius bar. Students volunteer that are willing to help others. Just what it says, you can either make them little stickers or badges or something, give them that kind of job or responsibility in the class to walk around and help other students. Would just want to have a conversation about what help means, not actually doing, not touching the mouse, not coming in and excusing someone from doing their work. Ask three, then me. Just what it says. I know a lot of teachers are familiar with it. Ask three of your peers, and then you can come and ask me. I want to see some original thought, or you or the students actually trying to work on it themselves. And then feel free to say, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. Sometimes that won't just be something to say. It'll actually be what's actually happening. You might not know, and some of your students may have a better way to figure out or to do some coding, a piece of coding, than what you've come up with, what Project Guts has actually put together. And establish protocols for naming projects as well as sharing them, Google Classroom, Google Doc, etc. So that goes back to the first point here, reducing the number of projects to oversee as they send them to you. You can create a Google Classroom and allow them to send you what you need. And then what to do if you get stuck on a code. You can look at a previous code and see how it was completed before. And that's not necessarily, cheating. I mean, there's a lot of remixing involved. And you'll cover that in the module one as well. Look in the cookbook that's located in the resource page. That's an excellent resource for you. It explains a lot of different things where you might get stuck on something and say, I just having a hard time just with this one piece of code. You can look in the cookbook. Change one piece of code around at a time until you get the desired outcome. Always refresh your page. Kerrie did mention before about, especially with graphs, refreshing is a little bit, oftentimes have a glitch with the graphs in the coding. Make sure that you're hitting save before you hit run code, and then make sure you're coding in Chrome. Chrome works best.
So if you still need help, here's some different ways that we can go through, and these will be the best resources for you. So you can register for the massive open online course. So that's that MOOC page that I showed you. If you were there in either the fall or the winter, you should have already received access to that. But if you hadn't, you can go through and sign up for that. And like I said, it's also located on the resource page. It gives you access to a forum where you can ask questions, you can find rubrics, you have lesson ideas. Our two program directors, Program Director Irene and Paige, are excellent resources. They are very, very responsive to their email. If you have any questions at all, if you are running into any problems, feel free to email them. They will email you back very quickly. They want you to use this tool in your classroom, and they are willing to help however they can in order for you to best use it.
So from here, we're going to go into the PowerPoint, just to let you know, participants who are attending this webinar, today's webinar, CS and Science, the PowerPoint and recording will be sent to you after about 24 to 48 hours after this webinar, to all participants on this webinar. And the Learning Hub number is actually on the PowerPoint, but I'm going to give that to you right now. So the Learning Hub number for the CS and Science webinar number 2 is 63684. However, it's on the PowerPoint as well. Again, today's Learning Hub number is 63684. And last but not least, I want to actually open it up for Q&A. Anybody that has any questions who are on the webinar right now, you can unmute your phone or either type a question, or either I can, and I'll moderate the questions. Kerrie and Rodney are prepared to answer any of your questions. Again, we're waiting to see if you have any questions for the facilitators, Kerrie and Rodney. Anybody online? One last call. Does anybody have any questions for Rodney or Kerrie? Okay, so I'm going to ask a question of Rodney and Kerrie, and I'm going to ask the question in terms of unplugged and unplugged activities. Some people are, were asking, is it necessary to do the unplugged activities in preparation for the plugged activities? Can either one of you respond to that question?
I would definitely recommend doing it, just because it gets students kind of in the mindset of doing something more kinesthetically before they just see it on the computer screen. I know that students do learn when they go through and are following the steps to code these different programs, but it's really going to cement the ideas of what they're doing, especially when you're changing the heading, which means which direction the turtle's looking. If they have to go through and do the unplugged activities first, it makes it much more kinesthetic and really cements the ideas. And so it's definitely not absolutely necessary, but is very recommended.
Yeah, I agree. I think it helps to have them more engaged with what they're doing and what's coming next on the plugged activities, because a lot of the unplugged, it just gives them some like prior knowledge. Okay, this is what we'll be looking at, and so when they are in front of the computer and they're working on the coding, they'll be able to access more, remember more, and say, okay, this is how it relates. So I always use the unplugged activities with my students.
Okay, and one more time, does anybody have any questions that they want to type in the text bubble? I mean, in the text part of the screen, or if you want to unmute your phones and ask the question of Rodney or Kerrie. Anybody? Okay, if not, I'm going to actually repeat that this CS and Science webinars does not take the place of any required CS for All semester or online semester or summer training for CS and Science Project Guts. This is intended for informational only, and it's not ongoing professional development that takes the place of any of the face-to-face training that's required of CS and Science teachers. So again, one more last call if anybody has a question. And I want to thank today's facilitators, Kerrie, Rovito, and Rodney Weems, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to facilitate a webinar, a CS and Science webinar, and you are actually in the classrooms implementing this yourselves, and we are very grateful that you took the time to actually share this with others. So again, I thank you so much. I thank you from the CS for All team, as well as Brenda Wilkerson, and that's it. We're going to end today's webinar. Wait a minute, I have one question. I think I have one question here. Oh, somebody says yes. Thank you. So they're thanking you, and I thank you, and Brenda thanks you, and the CS for All team thanks you. So
you're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right, so I'm going to end today's webinar. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.